The fall of 2004 was a big season of life for me. That summer before, I'd spent 10 weeks working at Okoboji Lutheran Bible Camp. Anybody know it? It's located up in the Lakes region of Iowa. That's how we like to say it. It's the only Lakes region of Iowa. But I got to be a counselor there for about 10 weeks. And it was one of the most important summers of my life. It was during the course of that time that I found that I'm most naturally me when I have the opportunity to share the good news of God's love with kids. When I get to speak into teenagers' lives, that's who they are and who they are becoming as the child of God. That I get to join in with families that I never had even met before at the beginning of the week and become family with them by the end of the week. That I get to participate with a staff of other counselors that were as wrapped up in this calling of God on their lives as I was by the end of the summer. I felt called. I felt that my life's calling was to do that work forever. The problem was, as I was coming back to Ankeny, Iowa, coming back to school at Simpson College, I had already spent about a year of my life and about $15,000 on my biology major. For me, at 19 years old, it was a remarkable sunk cost, and I just couldn't understand how I could walk away from that investment I had already made and into this future that seemed pretty awesome, but was definitely not for sure. I didn't know what to do. And I remember just thinking about it, hemming and hawing all night long, night after night. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. This feels so right. I don't know what to do. And so I did what I always did in those moments, and I called my best friend, Mike. Now, as Forrest Gump would say, Mike Wilson has always been my best good friend. And he came over to my house, and we were sitting in my parents' front room, the piano room. And I remember just laying on the piano bench, staring at the popcorn ceiling in my parents' house, telling Mike about how amazing the summer had been, but how committed I already was to this degree program. I don't know what to do. 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 And then Mike, as he always did, stopped me. Mostly he didn't like to hear me whine. And he said, "It sounds to me like you know exactly what you want to do. It sounds to me like you know exactly what you need to do. All there is left to do is to just do it." Here I am. I think a lot of you in your life are going to be called to, as the commercials used to say, be like Mike. You're going to be called to be like Mike into the lives and into the situations and circumstances and decisions of the people that you love. You may also have to be like Mike to be courageous in your own moments of decision. You might have to accompany people as they're making these big life-changing decisions about maybe to live in Minneapolis or Sioux Falls, for example. You might have to be someone who thinks about whether or not to start dating someone or whether or not to end a relationship through divorce or other means. You might have to accompany somebody as they're thinking about actually dealing with the problem, facing up against their addiction or other battle that they're facing in their life. You might have to speak courage into their story. How do you do that? How do you do that? Well, today we're going to talk about how to do that. But first, let's get straight on what courage is and what courage is not. Now, I think we've got some unhelpful ideas about courage because courage, I think sometimes popularly is really unhelpfully explained. Now, courage is not cognitive or like thinking or emotional clarity. It isn't that. It isn't clarity in the face of a difficult decision or circumstances that you have to deal with. And I think that we've been conditioned by coaches, maybe in sports or Hollywood or shows on TV or books or main characters in our favorite movies to believe some unhelpful notions about how humans ought to be, about human nature, especially when it comes to courage. And I think about those Marvel movies. You know, there's like 23 of them now, or 24, I don't know. I stopped watching after they killed Thanos. I was done. But it seems like they are always so clear about what they have to do. It's always like this good versus evil, right versus wrong, action versus inaction, this action or that action, and they just do it out of this place of clarity. It's like they're suggesting that to act in that way is to act without any confusion, any grayness or fog or complexity. So they're just able to do what they're supposed to do. Well, all of us that have lived even a small piece of life, who have a pulse and a brain in our head, know that life isn't that simple, right? I love what Brené Brown says about a lot of things, but I really love what she says about courage. She reminds us that to be courageous is to show up with our whole heart. That is everything that is swimming around in there, the good stuff and the bad stuff. It is also to show up with our whole mind, all of the good thoughts, the patterns of thinking, and all of the ones that are a little bit self-destructive, to show up with your whole self. To be courageous is to be fully present as you are. And for those of you who know, who have had to show up in big moments in life, those emotions come from all over the feeling wheel, don't they? It's weird how that works out. As a kid, it seems so simple. It is not so simple. Well, why do I tell you all of that? Well, I tell you all of that to tell you this. If you are holding yourself to some kind of standard of purity in those moments of courage, here's your official hall pass to let it go. And if you are called to be like Mike, to speak courage into the story of another person, and you feel like you have to push them to that clarity of thought and of feeling, you don't have to do that. It is fine if we are 70-30, 60-40, 51-49, 50-50 in the decisions and moments in our life. It is okay. It is normal. It is human. That is real. Life is messy, especially the courageous situations. So it begs the question, how can we be courageous then? Well, let's read the story of Shiphrah and Puah and get some answers. The king of Egypt said to these Hebrew midwives, whose names were Shiphrah and Puah, when you're helping the Hebrew women during childbirth on the delivery stool, does anyone have a delivery stool in your house? No? All right. I'm not sure what that looks like. I don't want to know. If you see that the baby is a boy, kill him. But if it is a girl, let her live. The midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. And the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, "Why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live?" And the midwives answered Pharaoh, "Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives even arrive." There's like a deep humor in that all the women in this room know that I don't know. But I'm going to trust that it's hilarious. So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. The word of God for the people of God. Just like that. Can you imagine? Speaking of messy, there they are, these two midwives who are more or less at the bottom of society. They're probably young women, right? And then all of a sudden you get a summons from the most powerful person in the world as you know it to meet. Now, how many of you have gotten a summons from your supervisor? How does that feel in your tummy? They're getting a summons from the Pharaoh, the person who is more or less in charge of everything that they can see. And probably it's the case that this Pharaoh doesn't travel unaccompanied. And so you're probably going to find yourself in a room with people protecting the Pharaoh, which means that they're going to come into the room before the Pharaoh shows up, and they're going to have the pointy end of the stick pointed at you. And so there you are. The power dynamics could not be more asymmetrical if you made them up, right? And then the Pharaoh makes what seems to be an absolutely impossible demand on you. I want you to kill all the kids of all the people you know. Or else. Can you imagine? So say the Pharaoh walks out. Can you imagine the two of them standing, one the other, on the other side of the room, looking at each other? What are you thinking? How does he have the nerve? How am I supposed to do that? What would I even do first? What if I did it and I actually did it? What then? Would the people that I know and that I love and the kids that I killed, would those families shun me after this? But I had to, right? Or would they come and would they find me in the streets? Would they beat us? Would they kill us? I mean, what are you feeling in that situation? These are the moments of courage, friends. It isn't one of those reductive moments from the scene of a Marvel movie. This is real life. And in case you're wondering, this is the kind of stuff happening all over the world right now. People are in these moments. But to bottom line it, there's fear, there's anger, there's futility. Those are just a few of the things that they're feeling in this impossible situation. But still, they make the right choice. They make the right choice. They were ultimately courageous, and it begs the question, how in the world did they do that? I can't walk by the freezer at night without eating more Ben & Jerry's. How did they do it? We don't get the exact words from the story. All we get is the outcome. And so it begs the question, what did they do leading up to that enabled them to be courageous? That's what I want to talk to you about today. Because I think that there are two things that they practice that are things that we can practice in our own lives that will enable us to be at least as courageous as Shiphrah and Puah. And the first thing is this. They trained for it. They trained for it. Friends, there is nothing more uncertain than birth in the ancient world. Nothing. The mortality rate in the birthing room was impossible to contend with, and yet midwives and doulas showed up again and again and again into the messiness of it all to develop courage. And they developed courage because courage is a habit. There's a really great leadership management quote that goes something like this. It says, you don't rise to the level of your goals for yourself and your organization. You fall to the level of your process. That is to say that you become who you've been practicing to be. And if you have been practicing to be courageous in the way that these midwives have been practicing to be courageous, then in the moments that require courage, you will also be courageous. The birthing rooms has been one of those classrooms for all of human history. And I know it because I've seen it. That kid's going to get away from you. We got a runner. I've seen it in my own life. I watched it as my wife, Julie, became a mother. It's an interesting thing. You start out as people who fall in love, and then you're having kids, and then you become a mom or a dad. And I watched Julie become a mom of our two boys. And from afar, it was a marvel to watch, pun intended. And men, you know what? I don't know if you know, or maybe you just need to appreciate this. So let me tell you. The psychological process that women go through ahead of the day is akin to the psychological process that paratroopers go through getting ready to jump out of the back of an airplane to get shot at. It could go one of two ways, right? It could go okay, or it could go splat. This is what women are going through, so give them a break. All of the nesting, all of the preparing, all of the dreaming, all of the changes, all of the everything is to prepare themselves for a reality that can't be promised. It just can't. It's the nature of it. All of that is happening in moms. And from the moment that we knew that our boys were coming, Julie engaged in that work every moment of every day, all the way to the day. I'll never forget watching her go through those 9 months of preparation, and then she went through 24 hours of labor. For my part, I was scared. I don't know how long labor was supposed to take, but I knew it wasn't supposed to be that long. All these moms out there keep saying something about, I sneezed and there was a baby. That was not our story with Emil. His head was a bowling ball. It wouldn't come out. And so when the doctors came in to start preparing Julie for a cesarean section, I started to get nervous. I started to get scared. And all of those what-if feelings begin to flood into you, right? But then when I looked at Julie, she was as she had prepared to be. Ready to be a mom. Come what may. Ready to jump. Midwives and doulas and birthing teams do this literally every day, just across the street, which is where Emil came. I remember looking at Prince of Peace and saying both of those prayers that day. They take people like me and Julie and Emil, and they show up. And they show up with their whole heart into a situation that is never guaranteed. And they are the hands that bring life out of whatever the alternative could possibly be. And so I think the question for all of us is, how are we practicing in the way that they practice in our lives? What are the small moments in our stories that we are taking captive to God so that we can speak courage into the story of a friend or speak courage into our own lives? Because, friends, it's important. Because it's not a matter of if, it is a matter of when you will be called to do that work. And the more courage is a habit, the more that you practice it, the more that you will be able to speak courage when it matters the most. They trained for it. And they also believed a different story. The other reason that they were able to be courageous was because their lives were lives that were soaked in, were baked in, were surrounded by and permeated, empowered and equipped by the story of the God that brings something out of nothing. A people out of Abraham. That was their story. And it's important that they had the story because, and this is important for all of you, we are always living into story. The powerful people in our lives are always telling a story about the way that the world works, but more importantly, the way that you are supposed to behave in that world. They're telling you you've got a part to play. It's true in the small ways in your house of origin. It's true with your boss at work. It's true with politicians on the campaign trail. And it's true 3,000 years ago with pharaohs in Egypt. The story in Shiphrah and Puah's case that they heard from the Pharaoh that day was that I am Pharaoh. This is my world. You are mine. These children are mine. I can do what I want, and you had better do what I say or else. This is your life. And so if they, Shiphrah and Puah, and you in this room don't have a counter story, another narrative to live into, another part to play, then how can you be critical of those stories? It's almost impossible. And so thanks be to God, the people of Israel, Shiphrah and Puah had a counter narrative, the narrative of God's power, promise, and faithfulness from Abraham through his sons to where they were in that moment. And the good news, friends, is that through Jesus Christ, we are inheritors of that story. And it's important that we remember it because there's a lot of pharaohs out there. And one of the ones that I see all the time that affects countless people is addiction. Prince of Peace is one of those churches that stands in front, stands up to addiction in our community. 5 days a week, we have AA meetings that meet here. We have Celebrate Recovery that meets here on Sunday mornings because everybody knows somebody. And a lot of us are in that boat dealing with addiction today. Addiction to substance, to work, to pornography, to digital mediums, just to name a few of them. And if you're a friend, a spouse, a coworker, a grandma, a brother, a sister, a caring person, it can be difficult to know what to do in those moments with the people that you know that are stuck in addiction. But at the core of it is speaking courage, is speaking another story. Many folks that are battling addiction are stuck. They're stuck because they're enmeshed in a fear-driven story that addiction tells them. It's a story that goes like this. If you admit that you are powerless over this, then they'll know. If you tell people that you need help, you'll be labeled as damaged goods. And so the safer bet is to keep hiding, keep using, keep it the same, equilibrium, status quo, because at least it's predictable. It's predictable misery. But friends, we were meant for life. life and life to the full. And so it is necessary then for someone like you and for someone like me to tell a different story, to tell a courageous story, to remind people of what is true. And as people that are living on this side of Easter in Jesus' victory over death, who follow a God that meets us in our weakness, in our mess, and calls us child, no matter what we have done, no matter what we have left undone, no matter how low we feel we are, calls us child. We have to speak. Because, friends, we are a people of a fundamentally different story than the story told by the pharaohs of this world. And so the question is this: how are you internalizing that story so that when the moment comes, it just flows out of you? Because it matters. It matters so much. It mattered then and it matters now. It mattered because, like the children in Egypt in this story, people without a voice, people who are stuck depend on us, people with a different story to share it. These children, their mothers and their families that they come from are enslaved, and their lives, at least according to the Pharaoh, are expendable in the story that he is telling. And friends, the Bible is clear on our call to be a voice for people such as these. Proverbs 31 says this. It says, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up, judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy." Friend, part of our promise as a blessing people is to speak up for people. Part of our promise as a Prince of Peace people is to show up for people. Part of our promise as people on this side of the resurrection is to be resurrected people, to share the good news that death doesn't get the final say. Because death needs a reminder that resurrection happened and still happens. Because in a world filled with powerful people telling all of us what we need to be and who we need to be and all that we can possibly be, they need to know that death has already tried that and God has already won. I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful that 20 years ago, Mike Wilson showed up in my parents' living room to speak courage into my story. It's why I'm here today. I'd be taping ankles probably. I was going to be an athletic trainer. It seemed like. And so when it came to this fall, and I got this opportunity in Sioux Falls, there I was again. I was hemming and hawing. I was like, this feels like an unbelievably great fit. This is an awesome opportunity. These folks really want to care for me and for my family. This is what I've always wanted to be. But I love my church. I love that they love me back. I love that most of them know that I work there now and know my name and that I'm not one of the students. 10 years, hard won, right? I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And so I called Mike. Funny story, when I moved up here, he moved up here. We went to high school together, we went to college together, and we moved up to Minnesota together. Every major decision that I've ever made in my life, he's been there. And so he said, "You know what, Jason, I don't think it's a matter of you not knowing what to do. I think you know exactly what to do. The only question now is whether you're gonna do it." And no, I'm not moving to Sioux Falls. Friends, it's not a matter of if. It is a matter of when you're going to have an opportunity to speak courage into somebody's story. And so, friends, I hope that you're practicing. I hope that you're practicing, training for that moment, and I hope that you've got the story in you to share with them as they go. Amen? Amen.